thinking about stories and the different stories that we tell ourselves and the different stories that we live in. So to continue from stories and perspectives, how fascinating. There's something that I noticed when I was little. I loved reading. I taught myself how to read when I was 5. And I would always be at the library. I read every single book at the children's section. And then I continued, with young adults and then fiction and everything that was there to read. That was my favorite pastime. Everything else was kind of boring to me, even playing with other children. So I guess reading really developed my imagination. And something that I noticed is that we tend to repeat stories, and if we have not been offered a better story or cannot tell ourselves a story that's more interesting, we tend to relive the same stories like the people that came before us. But we don't realize it, or we realize it when it's too late. For example, when you grew up, your parents were telling a certain story about their life. Or dad was a doctor, and then you became a doctor, and you married somebody who's similar to your mom, and you had a similar family. And that's the story. If you pay attention and notice, you will see that's how the world has been running. And maybe because, like printing and mass production of books and movies is a new thing, comparatively speaking. But now, when you look at where stories come from, for a while it was largely books. Now, with all of the movies and social media way to tell our own stories, it's getting more interesting because all of a sudden, the people that don't read have access to a lot more stories. So if you pay attention to the generation that grew up with Hollywood movies, they try to live Hollywood movies. And we're also freaking out and getting upset on social media because we can see how somebody who potentially came from similar upbringing or background as ourselves is all of a sudden telling a different story than ours. And it's like, wait a minute, how come I'm toiling at this job and they're going on vacation and doing this and doing that? And it's like, we came from the same place. How come they're making this story happen and I can't? They must be wrong. There has to be something wrong in them. Because a lot of times we fail to realize that we are the ones trapping ourselves in a certain story and putting limitations on it of what's possible for us and what's not. And also, to shift from one storyline to another, there are action steps that are necessary. Henceforth, the hero's journey. You have to go into the unknown. You have to explore. You have to fight your battles, which are mostly with the limitations that live in your mind and your belief system. And then you can expand and move and switch into a new storyline. I'm thinking in those terms, I realized I've done it lots of times in my life before. Just because my old character were no longer serving the story that I was trying to live and was hindering it. So I would kill her, figuratively speaking, meaning stop believing in certain things that were no longer serving me and start believing in new things that would support me to make the new storyline possible. So it's this constant dying and rebirthing and constantly rewriting your story over and over and over again so it can support you. Instead of hindering you. And while you're doing it, you are seeing how that was never your story to begin with, but it was a story that you adopted from somebody else, which would be called like conditioning, domestication, whatever you want to call it. And you're not obliged to live in that story anymore. See, like Romeo and Juliet tried to do it, but with not that much of a success. Because their family was keeping them trapped in those stories, right? We hate each other, so you should hate each other too. When you think about it, the whole world is doing it. Dividing itself based on religion, politics, and taking their identity from that. Whereas, like, we have no identity. We're limitless. We're unconditioned awareness. And when we realize who we truly are and spend time in meditation and manage to be detached enough to be an observer of our lives, we can see what have we attached our identity to, and then we can detach from everything that no longer serves us and attach to something new that we wish to invite loosely. Because life is about having fun, and once you're done living a certain story, of course you'd want to start a new one. And that's freedom, to know that you're not your story. And at the same time, all possibilities are open and you can live any story. And then, you have to look at books, movies, social media, everything around you as resources. And be careful what stories are you buying. And then you can take a couple of stories and make a mashup and live them together. Because why not?